One of the things that I am a big proponent of for myself and other DXers is making sure that we have the right tools to get the job done. Making sure that our toolbox is filled with an assortment of tools that we can use for whatever various things we're trying to do with our DX. So if you're trying to go after transoceanic, there might be a different tool set that you need. If you're trying to get graveyarders, you might need a different tool set and so forth. And those tools can be anything from gear or equipment to know-how. And they all add up to making sure that we have everything at our disposal that we need to be able to go out and get DX. Well, one of those tools is actually something that can help you to remove either pest radio stations or noise sources that are blanketing over or getting in the way of our ability to hear the DX that we want, and it's called a phaser. So today on DX 101, we're going to talk a bit about phasing, what it is, and how to do it, and how it can make a huge difference in your DX. So stay tuned. So let me tell you a quick story. When I first got into phasing, I tried it out several years earlier and I couldn't get it to work. I didn't really understand the concept, and at the time there wasn't really any videos or anything on YouTube that kind of demonstrated it. But then I circled back around because some DXers were talking about it, and I actually kind of did some more research and kind of learned a bit more about it and how it's supposed to work, and did some reading. And so I got a phaser box from Jerry Thomas from Radio Plus, unfortunately, before he passed away, obviously. Got his quantum phaser and plugged everything in and started kind of tweaking and working with it. And I wanted to see if I could get rid of a station that was always a pest for me. So I picked 840 WHAS in Louisville, Kentucky. Just one of those stations that's just, I was in Charleston and it was just always there, dominating the frequency. Not much I could really do about it. I could never null them out, right, by turning my loops or anything like that. So I had two antennas. I had a W6LVP loop and a ham radio dipole up in a tree. Plugged that into my phaser, started getting to work on it. I was able to null them out to the point where they were gone, and what was left was 4 VEH in Haiti. So the very first time I ever used a phaser, I nabbed Haiti, a brand new country I'd never heard before. And so instantly I was a firm believer in, okay, this phasing stuff is pretty amazing. So what I want to talk about today is kind of cut maybe some of that research time that I had to go through down for you and introduce you to what phasing is, what you need to be able to do it, and then how do you do it. So phasing is taking the signals that are being received from two or more antennas. Usually in our case, it's going to be two, but two or more antennas. And we lock in on a signal that we don't want, whether that's a noise source or a radio station that we don't want. And then by adjusting the phasing, that's the phase of the two antennas coming in, we're able to either attenuate or completely remove that signal that we don't want or that noise source that we don't want, which allows us to reveal what's underneath, right? So in my case, what I have here is I have two W6 LVP loops. They're sitting at about 12 feet up off the ground on a TV rotor, so I can adjust, different directions that I want to point it from. And they're separated from each other by about 60 to 70 feet. One's on one end of the house, the other's on the other side. And so what I'm able to do is, let's say I'm on 820 and I want to get rid of WBAP because WBAP is a very strong station from Fort Worth, Texas that dominates the frequency for me. Let's say I want to get rid of them. Well, I can then make sure I kind of point my antenna at Fort Worth, right? So I kind of point both of my antennas at that direction. And then I hear WBAP in both antennas and I adjust my gain so that I have the signal coming in roughly the same amount of strength on both antennas. And then I start adjusting my phase until I am able to null out WBAP. And since my antennas are both pointing in the same direction at that station, if I null out the station while I'm pointing right at it on one side of my bidirectional antenna, my loop antenna, then that basically leaves me with the other side of that antenna, right? So I've taken a bidirectional kind of figure 8 pattern and I've chopped it in half and made it cardioid. And I'm really kind of pointing in that one direction that's away from the noise source or the signal that I don't want. That's what I'm able to do with phasing. So a couple of things you're going to want to make sure that you do have to be able to hear the signal in both of your antennas. If you can't hear the signal in both of your antennas, it's not going to be something you're going to be successful in nulling or phasing out fully, or even at all in some cases. You want to have two antennas that are of similar or equal gain. The reason for that is that if it's stronger in one antenna than it is in the other antenna, it's going to be harder to null out. That's still going to be in there. Now, with antenna phasers like I'm using here, my MFJ-1026, I'm actually able to level set that gain between the two antennas, so I can adjust it so that they're equal. But if you come in having two antennas that are already of equal gain, it gives you more room to play with, right? There's less adjustment that you have to do. It's just easier to do your phasing if you already have two antennas of equal or similar gain. I have used a 12 dB W6LVP loop and a 23, 24 dB CAS antenna amplifier, and phased between those two and had great success. It just took a little bit more work. So ideally, you should have two antennas of the equal or similar gain. And ideally, I know in the case of the MFJ-1026, the manual says you should have the antennas pointing in the same direction. And that's what I do with my two loops, because it helps me to be able to null out what I'm trying to get rid of and kind of leave the other half of that antenna pattern. And I can kind of visualize when I turn my antennas how I want that to work, right? What direction do I want to leave in place, and what direction do I want to get rid of? So it helps me with that. Now, in the case of magnetic loops like I'm using here, let me give you a couple of little tips. So ideally, you want to get these antennas outdoors, and you want them to be as far away from buildings and noise sources as possible. The further away, the better. They don't have to be super high up off the ground. Height isn't really that big of a deal. And a determinant in how effective they are. I know DXers that have them right on the ground, about a foot off the ground. That's fine. The more important thing is to get it as far away from noise sources as you can. Now, obviously, if you have to have it indoors, you have to have it indoors. You do the best you can. That's still better than nothing. That's still better than a piece of speaker wire strung up around your ceiling, which I have DX'd off of. But ideally, you want them to be as far away from noises as possible, and as far apart from each other as possible too. I mentioned mine. I've got them on opposite ends of the house, about 60, 70 feet apart. But I do know DXers that have twin loops, magnetic loops, on a balcony. So one on one end of the balcony, the other on the other end of the balcony. And they get great results. Is it ideal and perfect? No, but is it going to work? Yeah, you're going to get DX with it. You're going to be able to hear stuff with that setup. It just may not be as perfect as it should be, but you're still going to hear stuff, okay? So you want your antennas to be as far apart from each other as possible. You want your antennas to be outdoors if at all possible, and you want them to be as far away from noise as possible. That's the ideal. So kind of work with that concept and then figure that out in the construct of what you have that you have to work with. There are a handful of different phasers that are out there on the market, but probably the most popular model for AMDXers right now that's effective and works and is budget friendly is the MFJ-1026 phaser. Now, right out of the box, the MFJ-1026 is not friendly for AMDXing, so you do have to make a modification to get the 1026 to work for AMDX, and we actually have a video here that you can watch that shows you how to make the modification. It's super easy. All you need is a pair of needle nose pliers and remove 6 little components off the circuit board, and you're done. Super easy. Don't have to do any soldering or anything. So you'll want to watch that video, make that modification to your MFJ-1026, and then you're ready to go for AMDXing with your phaser and your two antennas coming in. You need some sort of radio. I personally recommend an SDR just because they are really, really good for DX in general, but also for phasing. And the main reason why is that you, in most cases, depending on what software you're using, you have a numerical readout for signal strength that actually shows you the dBm of the signal strength of what you're receiving. And remember that in this case, it's a negative number usually, right? So the higher that negative number is, we're talking if it goes from 50 to 40, that's going up, right? That's getting higher. If it's going from 50 down to 60 down to 70, that's going lower because we're talking about negative numbers, right? So the higher it is, the stronger it is, the lower it is, the weaker it is. That's important. That's an important concept for us to know because we are going to be using that information, that data, to help us with our phasing. We're going to demonstrate here in our next segment. So ideally, either an SDR that gives you a numerical readout in the software that you're using for signal strength. SDR console is a great option for that if you're using any myriad of different SDRs. I'll be using SDRUno for our RSPdx. That's what we're using for our demonstration today. It also has a signal meter with the numerical value. That's ideal. If you're using a desktop or a portable that has an old school kind of S meter, you just need something that gives you a reasonably accurate signal strength to help you when you're trying to adjust the signal strength and the phasing to reduce these signals down. You need something that's going to give you an accurate number or an accurate representation at least, so that you'll know when you've got to that peak null through the phasing. So now that you know what you need and you understand the basic premise of what we're going to be doing, let's show you how you can incorporate phasing into your AMDX. All right, so we are here in the shack and we've got our MFJ phaser up and running. We've got our RSPdx with the twin W6 LVP loops and running through SDRUno software rather. So a couple things that I want to talk about before we really dive into the demonstration on phasing. Number one, you're really going to be best served. You can do this by just listening to the signal, but your best results really can happen if you have a signal meter with a numerical signal value like we have here in SDRUno. We have it in two spots actually, right here and right here. Now we also have a signal meter, but it's not super accurate. And we also have kind of these peaks and things like that. And again, you can listen to it and kind of do it, but this is the easiest and most productive way is by having some sort of numerical value here for your signal level that you can look at. SDR console has it, SDRUno has it, some others do, some others don't. Again, you can do it by listening, but it's a lot not as accurate. I feel like it's not as accurate. Another little tidbit is it works best if you have two antennas that are of similar or equal gain. I have two W6 LVP loops, both about 12 dB of gain or so. They're on opposite sides of my house, so they technically should be pretty close. One of them might be a little bit stronger than the others, vice versa, depending on different conditions where that particular antenna is sitting. But by and large, they should be relatively pretty much the same, especially if you have them pointed in the same direction, which I do. I actually use this. This is a remote control here for my rotor. I have two rotor boxes here that my loops are sitting in. It's an RCA MFJ-1026 rotor. And so I have two boxes, but this one remote will actually control both rotor boxes, both rotors. And I have presets here on my rotor remote control and on the box itself as well. So it's like north, northeast, east, southeast, south, southwest, west, northwest, north, right? So I can go the entire circle of bearings from just one button here on my remote control, and by doing so it actually will adjust both of them. If I kind of pull it back here, kind of point it towards both of them at the same time, it'll adjust both of those rotor boxes at the exact same time, since they're both the same rotor boxes and they both use the same remote control. So we're going to use that here. Now right now I'm at 180 degrees, which is where I want to be, so we're going to put that remote off to the side. We're going to try here to null out a radio station that is to my south. It is WBOK in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is just to my south here, across Lake Pontchartrain. And it's so it's a local station on a graveyard frequency. It's pretty strong, as you're about to see here in a few moments, and you can see kind of the signal level on negative 50 dBm. That's not too bad. Right now we have the MFJ phaser in bypass mode with it turned off, but if you and then what I do is I keep my phase, and then I have this is the B loop right here. The W6 LVP B loop, which is in the auxiliary port. I keep it turned down all the way counterclockwise. Same thing here with my W6 LVP loop A, which is in my main port, so I keep it down all the way counterclockwise. And then we have here, this is the phase button, or the phase knob rather. I keep it all the way down counterclockwise as well until it's time for me to actually use it. So otherwise, unless I'm using it and actually trying to do phase, everything stays fully counterclockwise. There's also this TR delay. I keep it fully counterclockwise anyway because I'm not using that. because I'm not using this in a ham radio setup where I'm doing any transmitting. So right now you'll see that we do have signals coming in even though the MFJ is off. That's because we're in bypass mode, so it's actually pulling in signals from the main antenna. However, if I, with everything turned down, if I engage it and turn it on, you'll see all the signal levels go down because we have everything turned all the way down. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to turn on my main antenna here, and I'm going to see what is my signal level of this local station with my main antenna only. So we turn it all the way up fully clockwise, and you'll see we're at about a 52, negative 52, negative 51 dBm or so. All right, so now we're going to turn that back down. Now we're going to come over to our auxiliary antenna, which is also the same basic loop antenna, just on the opposite side of the house. And I'm going to turn it up all the way and see where we're at. Negative 51, negative 52-ish, okay? So this one was at 52.5, 52.3, 52.9. So it's slightly weaker in the A than it is in the B. So what I can do here, it's a little bit stronger here, is I can just back the auxiliary antenna gain off slowly. And there we go. Now we're about that 52, 53-ish range, like we are over here. So now I'm going to turn my main all the way back up again. And you'll actually see when I do that, that signal level goes down. If you're looking at the numerical value here on the readout, my signal level went down slightly. That's good, because if it went up like this, you see it got to negative 45, negative 46 here. That means that we're in the wrong polarity. So if it goes up when I have both antennas on, I don't want, and I have them set to the same signal level, it shouldn't. It should go down when I have both antennas set to the same signal level, okay? So if it goes up when you turn that main back up again, hit your polarity reverse, and you'll see it come back down again. And it should be lower than it was when either one antenna was by itself. A couple of notes about that polarity. So if you're ever trying to phase and you can't get a good phase, you can reverse the polarity to try to get a better phase. But by using the method I just described, where when you turn both antennas up and it goes down, you should normally be able to get a good phase in the polarity that you're in. Super, super strong, super, super local signal. Sometimes you have to do the polarity reverse, but even then that can be kind of wonky. So normally when it goes down with both antennas in, you're in the right polarity. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to adjust my phase, and I'm going to ever so slightly tweak the W6LVP-B loop, the auxiliary loop, to try to get it as the signal as low as possible. So what we're looking for here is I want that dBm to keep going down, 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 down. So I'm going to keep adjusting the phase. Right now it's fully counterclockwise. We're going to turn it clockwise until it starts to go down. And then once it starts to go down, we're going to keep an eye on it. And then once it comes back up again, I stop and I start going back the other way, counterclockwise again. Because once it starts to go up, I know I've reached my bottom point and I need to go back again. So then I get to my bottom point, and I continue to go counterclockwise now, and then you'll see that signal start to come back up again. And once it does, go back clockwise again until you see that bottom. And we're going to keep doing that swing back and forth until you kind of zero in on the low point. Again, this is where a numerical value on your signal meter will be a big, big help. You can do it by audible sounds in your headphones or whatever, but it's so much easier if you have that numerical value. So keep swinging back and forth until you get to that low point. Once you've gotten to that low point, you can try to tweak either your auxiliary or your main. I usually do the main auxiliary. I usually leave the main where it's at. I can try to tweak that auxiliary input just a little bit one way or another. If it starts to come up again, back it back off again until it goes down. And then if it starts to come back up again, back it back off. And you're doing the same thing on that. You're just kind of rocking it slightly, very small movements until you get to that peak. And then you do the same thing back on the phase again. And then you just do that combination back and forth until you get the maximum null on that signal. So let's actually show that in operation now.
Have yet to run across.
So this is our local.
I have yet
now I'm gonna start adjusting the phase.
That's right. That's right. And a little bit about him, just so people know you out there. He is from Brooklyn.
And I'm keeping an eye on my signal meter.
The Brooklyn, Queens area.
You see, it's going down.
When he was growing up, was all black.
71. I'm going to continue to go. Just because we got to a low point, don't stop. Keep going. We're looking for when it comes back up again.
He came back home and went to NYU.
And now it's coming back up. So now we're going to go back the other way. We've been going clockwise. Now we're going counterclockwise. Right?
2013. So he's risen.
Right about here, it looks like. Now I'm going to go to my auxiliary input here, and I'm going to rock it just ever so slightly to make sure that I've got this null as deep as possible. Now back until it comes up again. Now my signal's coming back in, so we go back counterclockwise again. I got a really good null right here. I keep going though. You see it's coming back? Go back clockwise again. Now I'm going to try got it right about here. Right about here. Now I can adjust my phase again. We're going to rock back and forth on the phase. Look at that, negative 74. They're gone. So now my local is completely gone. I've gotten it down to a nice low point here, about 70, somewhere between 70 and 74. And you can use, obviously, the signal meter here, but then that's where you start to also use your headphones or your ears to help you really kind of fine tune. So if you're still hearing any of that signal, even if the signal meter is not really doing a whole lot of difference, you can still gauge if the signal you're trying to get rid of is still there by listening to it. Because sometimes, you know, if a new station's kind of taking over, that signal level might be getting stronger again, right? Well, that's good in this case because you're making that particular one stronger. You don't want to continue to lower that down because that particular station you're trying to here is getting stronger and the one you're trying to get rid of is disappearing. So sometimes you can use that combination of your ears and the signal meter to really help you out here. So in this case, we've gotten rid of them. And because we're on a graveyard frequency, I could just sit here and wait for a new station to come up on top and take over on a frequency where I normally have a local station. And again, let me remind you how loud they are.
I said, when her husband was running for president, she said,
negative 48
for the first time.
So you can see what a difference that phaser just made in getting rid of that local station and giving us now an opportunity to hopefully hear something that might rise up underneath them. A couple of things about this. So I can leave this exactly where it's sitting, and it should be pretty good for the most part. Now, you may have to make some adjustments every once in a while to the phase. The reason for that is, especially if you're doing this during like gray line, sunrise, sunset conditions, sometimes you get a mix of ground wave and sky wave. And sometimes you get a mix of multiple different bounces or reflections of sky waves. So you might be getting, a signal from one direction, and then you get it from the same signal from a different direction, a different bounce, and it's slightly out of phase from the original one. And so you might have phased that original signal, the ground wave or that other sky wave, but now you get either a different reflection or a different propagation path, and now it's not nulled out completely. So you may have to tweak it a little bit, especially during those gray line periods where that's more prevalent, but it can also happen at night sometimes. You might get a deep null on a signal, and then the reflection angle changes, and that changes the phase. So you have to kind of tweak that as you go. So you may walk away from it and then 10 minutes later come back, or be listening, a few minutes later, and all of a sudden the signal's coming back and you're not adjusting anything on your phaser and you're thinking, what's going on? That's okay. That's normal. You just have to tweak and make adjustments to your phasing to be able to null them back out again. But that's really about it. I mean, that's the basics of how to do the phasing. And you can use this same technique with local stations, with dominant stations on a frequency, with sources of noise. If you have, let's say, a really loud noise source that's in your area and you want to get rid of it, point your antenna right at it on both antennas, phase that sucker out and see what's underneath. And now you have an opportunity to hear something that's outside of that noise. And again, ideally for what antennas you want to use, I've read so many people that say an omnidirectional is the best, like a vertical antenna. That's fine. Those are very susceptible to noise, obviously. I'm having a lot of success and have had a lot of success with magnetic loop antennas. They're low noise anyway, so you're not really hampered by as much noise. And you can turn those in whatever direction you need to either pinpoint that source of that signal that you don't want or that noise that you don't want, turn it in that direction and then get rid of it. And by doing so, what we're doing is taking a bidirectional antenna. So let's say right now I'm on my it's pointing, it says south, but it's really north-south because it's bidirectional, right? So it's part of the antenna is pointing to the south, part of it's pointing to the north. And so what we're doing here is we've actually nulled out a signal that's on the south side of that signal pattern, that antenna pattern. So what we've left ourselves with is the north side, the northern half. So we should be hearing stations kind of in that northern swath of the bandwidth, not to the southern side. We've gotten rid of signals from that side. We should be mostly hearing stuff on the top half. In this particular case, because I have two bidirectional antennas. On my CAS antennas that are unidirectional, I can really get really tight beam width sometimes by using those. So I can say I have a northeast and an east antenna, let's say, and I've got a signal that's to my east and I want to get rid of it. Well, I use those two antennas and I get rid of it here. So what am I doing? I'm really kind of tightening on that northeast side, really making sure that we're kind of tightening up that beam width. So again, ideally, it should be two antennas pointing close to or the same direction, two antennas at or near the same amount of gain. Again, obviously, you can adjust that a little bit with the gain knobs on the phaser here, in this case for the MFJ, and then just rock back and forth. Rock that, start with that. Once you've got the two antennas equal, right, and then you put the main back in. So you set your main to the signal level of the station that's on the main. Turn it down. Turn your auxiliary up. Set it to be equal to what the main is hearing, and then turn your main back in. If the signal levels increase in strength, reverse your polarity. You should see it lower in strength. And once it does, then you just start turning your phase from fully counterclockwise, start turning it clockwise until you get that low point of the signal. And then once you get the low point, keep going. You'll start to see it come back up. Then you go back the other way and just keep rocking back and forth that way until you get that signal as low as you possibly can. Do the same technique, very, very small movements on that auxiliary gain, very, very small movements on that phase, and keep going back and forth like that until you get a completely nulled out signal like we have here. So hopefully this has been helpful for you and shown you the power of what phasing can do. If so, we'd appreciate it if you give us a thumbs up on the video, and don't forget to leave a comment as well and just know what you thought. And if you have not yet done so, please make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when new videos are available. From all of us here at DX Central, my friends, 73 Best of DX. Now let's go back over here and see what's on the bands.